Tonight we're further exploring the theme of Vocatio, or calling in life, how we discover the work of our soul in the soul of our work. Through a counterintuitive approach, we are suggesting tonight that God gifts us with the call to temptation to help us find our calling in life a little bit quicker and easier. Oftentimes we think about temptation as the choice between doing good and doing evil, but what we may find tonight is that oftentimes the choice to do good, that is the wrong good, can kill you faster than doing evil itself. We'll explore those issues and more with and finding one's call in life with our special guest tonight, Clayton Chapman. Clayton Chapman is a multi-award nominated James Beard Rising Star Chef of the Year nominated chef, and also the owner of the renowned Gray Plume restaurant here in Omaha, Nebraska, which opened in 2010 to great acclaim as the ecologically greenest restaurant in the country, and now has been about every year up for all kinds of awards for best restaurant in the Midwest. Well, before we go to Clayton, a passage from the book of James, chapter 4, verses 11 through 17 in the Message version.
Don't badmouth each other, friends. It's God's word, His message, His royal rule that takes a beating in that kind of talk. You're supposed to be honoring the message, not writing graffiti all over it. God is in charge of deciding human destiny. Who do you think you are to meddle in the destiny of others? And now I have a word for you who brashly announce, today, at the latest tomorrow, we're off to such and such a city for the year. We're going to start a business and make a lot of money. You don't know the first thing about tomorrow. You're nothing but a wisp of fog, catching a brief bit of sun before disappearing. Instead, make it a habit to say, if the Master wills it and we're still alive, we'll do this or that. As it is, you are full of your grandiose selves. All such vaunting self-importance is evil. In fact, if you know the right thing to do and don't do it, that, for you, is evil.
This episode is actually being taped during Lent, and Lent is that 40-day period minus Sundays in which we remember that Jesus, after receiving his own sense of call at his baptism, went into the wilderness to try to figure out what is this that specifically that I am being called into. And there, so the story goes, he was tempted by the devil, or the Satan in Hebrew, which means adversary. And there, you think about that story. If you were the Satan, the adversary, and you wanted to tempt Jesus with, to steer him off his path, what would you do? I mean, probably this Jesus person wouldn't be tempted by ordinary things, certainly no low-level evils, that kind of thing. You'd want to pull out the big guns, the best thing you could possibly do. Interesting enough, the Satan, or adversary, tempts Jesus with doing good, not evil. Why would Jesus be tempted by doing evil? He's tempted by doing good, three particular goods. One is feeding the world, focusing his ministry on feeding the world, which is behind that invitation to turn stones into bread, or to focus his whole ministry on political power, or to focus his whole ministry on doing miracles that would convince people absolutely that he is the Christ. Of course, Jesus had something to do with feeding people, with exercising political power, and with miracles in his ministry. But what the temptation represents is the temptation to focus all of his efforts and energy on any one of those things, which for any number of people could be a perfectly good thing to do. But for Jesus was the good that he was not called to do. That's where doing the wrong good, in a sense, can kill us faster than doing outright evil, because it gets us to invest our energies into something to the side of what our soul considers important. And this underlying idea was really kind of brimming in under the surface of our passage from James today, where we enter this community that is boiling, and people upset with each other, people believing that other people aren't doing the right thing, and James says, hey, listen, God is the one who determines destiny, as in the Message version. It said, in other words, God is the one who calls us onto our path. So don't go just simply questioning other people's path. Pay attention to your own path. And he concludes that by saying, in fact, if you know the right thing to do and don't do it, that is, if you know what your sense of calling is and don't do it, that for you, well, the Message says is evil. That's an unfortunate paraphrase of the Greek hamartia. That's really sin. And of course, sin in our parlance is also misunderstood. Sin in the biblical world simply meant separation from God, alienation. So what he's saying is, when you have that sense of call, of destiny, and you veer away from that, it separates you. It separates you from God, but you sense the separation from God because you're separating internally from yourself. And so things begin to just feel like they're going in the wrong direction. Your soul gets restless because you're doing something that's off to the side of what it considers its most important work in the world, its most important joys and most important love. Doing the wrong good is one of those ways that temptation actually can help us on our path, because when we start doing it, our soul, in a sense, revolts. It starts getting bored. It starts getting antsy. It starts to get disruptive at times, almost like a wild animal trapped in a cage trying to get out. If that soul isn't fed, it will, in a sense, chew its own limbs off to get away. And how many of us are in professions where we may be doing what's good in the eyes of the world? We might be putting our mortgage payment in every month because of it and so forth, and yet internally our soul is chewing its own arm off to get out of that trap that it's in, screaming for release. And yet how wonderful it is when we can recognize that we have a path, and it may not be other people's path, and other people may want us to be on a different path. And yet that which is consistently bringing alive is the good we are called to do in the world. We need to worry about our path and not simply what other people think of our path or what we think of other people's paths. That's not a call to moral relativism. That's a call to listening deeply to the voice of God within, and then following that voice. Because while not going in the direction that it calls you may separate you, following in that place is the thing you most deeply want to do and love to do and feel most alive doing. The passage is really about finding your joy, not simply avoiding sin and temptation. What can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what your path has been to be the executive or the owner and chef of the Great Plume?
Sure. Well, first, thank you for having me. Happy to be here. I'm an Omaha native, so I grew up in Omaha working in a series of restaurants, as a young teenager, starting as a sandwich artist at Subway. as most of us start. But really, in all honesty, starting as a dishwasher in a small Cajun restaurant that was owned by two retired military guys. And I was kind of able to see firsthand what it was like to, for them at least, what it was like to run a small business. I enjoyed the kind of aspect and the fast pace and the ever learning that was required of me, and it stuck. They started giving me small projects of doing prep, and then eventually moving me on the line, and I loved it. So I worked in a series of restaurants in Omaha before attending culinary school in Chicago. So I graduated from the Illinois Institute of Art in downtown Chicago with a culinary arts degree. And I worked at, in a fine dining restaurant in Chicago for a few years before eventually traveling and making my way back to Omaha.
You worked with some fairly big names in Omaha, in Chicago, as I recall, too.
I did. I worked at a restaurant called True. It was owned, or is owned by Rick Tremonto and Gail Gand, both award-winning chefs. He's on the savory side, and she's the pastry chef. So.
That's great. And I know when you came back to Omaha, one of the restaurants you worked in was V. Mertz, which was one of the finest steakhouses in Omaha, and you became the youngest executive chef in the nation.
Yep. So I was the youngest executive chef in V. Mertz's 30-year history, which was, it was big shoes to fill, I suppose. And from there, I was the executive chef at a prime steakhouse called Spencer's. It was in the downtown Hilton Garden Inn.
And on to Grey Plume.
On to Grey Plume.
So what is distinctive about Grey Plume, in your opinion, as you describe it to others?
Sure. Well, it's kind of twofold. On the food side, we write kind of an ever-evolving, seasonally driven menu, influenced by the best of ingredients that are available as close to home or locally sourced. So we work with over 65 growers in the Nebraska, Iowa kind of heartland area that provide us with all of our groceries. We have a group of chefs, myself, and then a team that I work with. It's kind of a collaborative process in writing this ever-evolving menu. But we make absolutely everything from scratch in-house. So everything from fermented sourdough bread to churning our own butter that we both serve with bread and butter service, but also cook with, to roasting our own coffee, to practicing kind of a no-waste attitude with our proteins or animals, so to speak. So we're bringing in whole bison, whole pigs, whole lamb, and we're breaking them down in-house and using the bones for stock and different preparations with the whole animal.
So really little to nothing goes to waste then.
Absolutely.
Wow, that's incredible. It's interesting because I think the common stereotype for a restaurant, if you were to pull what you said and paste up some grand categories like greenest restaurant in the United States, and where it's all organic and locally sourced and so forth. A lot of people in their minds picture some, and I don't mean any criticism at all, because I love these kind of restaurants, is the kind of the crunchy granola, the flannel shirts and
Sure,
kind of this kind of thing, which are again great restaurants. But you're actually doing something that's a very, very fine cuisine, very sophisticated. Very comfortable surroundings to be in, very elegant, and yet it's all pushing those very concepts to the very limits of where you can push them. That's fascinating. Did you start out with some kind of a grand ecological passion that you were going to then create this? What was your route?
Well, so it really started with the food. We wanted to be able to write a menu based on what was available to us. From a chef's perspective, selfishly, right? In order to put my best foot forward as a chef, or to be able to create the best menu, that really includes, starting with the best ingredients. I think it's fair to say that the best or the freshest ingredients are those that are available closest to home. They've been out of the ground the least amount of time. And so if you start with that kind of core principle, it really, it evolved and grew. And being able to know how the food was raised, and being able to know the growers, know the farmers, know the ranchers, being able to kind of tell the story to the guest, how the food made its journey from the farm to the plate. And we can do all of that, which is, it's amazing to be able to be part of it. With that kind of core mission in place. The evolution of creating a sustainable dining environment that kind of mirrored that same philosophy of the menu was just kind of a natural fit. We really felt that we couldn't have one without the other. And in an effort to kind of maintain, our transparency or our authenticity and our business practices, we started with, a core group of initiatives that we wanted to put in place. Composting, recycling, vermiculture with our leftover menus once we had printed them on both sides. For those that aren't familiar with vermiculture, it's composting with worms and shredded paper. We wanted to, reduce, reuse, and recycle, so to speak. But that kind of turned into a snowball effect where we said if we're going to, do this in one area of the business, why would we not do it in the other? And it eventually grew into what it is now.
That actually, as you're saying that, I just heard James's passage over and over again. Just in a very organic way, in the sense that you found that good that you had this draw to do, that lit you up, and you realized that, well, if we're doing that, we need to be whole at doing this. Otherwise, it would separate us from ourselves in a sense. I think that's actually a very organic way of what James is saying when he says, you know the right thing to do, and if you don't do it, it's separation.
Absolutely.
And so one thing leads to another. And I understand that you, the organic piece of that equation too, came, organically, so to speak.
Certainly. Well, it really, it started when my wife and I were pregnant with our first child. We had kind of decided, before he was born, that we were, really evaluating the way we lived our lives. And, when you have to start caring for somebody other than yourself, it really forces you to think about the way you do things. Mm. And so we had decided before he was born that, my wife, both of us, but mainly her, we were really going to make his baby food because we wanted to, be aware of what he was eating and where it was coming from and how it was sourced and how it was raised. Because as that greatly affects us on a much larger level. Mm. So that was kind of the beginning of it. I had worked with a series of local growers, working as a chef in other restaurants and things, but that was really the catalyst that really made us kind of stop and look at what we were eating and, what we were feeding him. And as a chef, that was kind of the transformation of, rather than just looking at ingredients and thinking about putting, good flavors together or showcasing technique or something, it really turned into what I could source from the best possible sources, and creating a menu based on those ingredients. Mm-hmm.
So you kind of started with this love of your child, and what's best for your child, and one thing leads to another, and that's what's best for us older folks. So, yeah,
you bet.
So everything, basically local. I think over 90% of your menu, even in the winter, is local.
It is.
And organic. And does that mean that you can, it doesn't sound like you can plan out a menu very far in advance then if you're relying on just what's local?
Yeah, we often tell, it's funny depending who you ask, but we often write the menu like 3 times before it actually, is a finalized thing. We'll write a menu based on the season and based on what we think is, going to be coming to us. Mm-hmm. Then we'll write a menu based on, what the ingredients are that the farmers speak with us about that, are upcoming. Mm-hmm. And then we'll actually write a menu based on what comes in our door. And
that's such a metaphor for life.
Yeah, the constant fluctuation or the ability to adapt is a good paraphrase. But they typically tend to be sort of similar but very different at the same time.
So what happens? You've written the menu twice already, and then the farmer brings in something that's you were expecting, I don't know, carrots, but there's beets or something like this.
Sure.
What does that trigger then? This is probably the day of or the day before. It'd be pretty close to when you actually have to be coming out with something to serve. What process does that trigger then?
I think it's good because it forces us to constantly, I don't like to use the phrase like on the top of our game, but it forces us to always be thinking and to always be engaged in what we're doing. It forces us to collaborate, as a group of chefs, and to kind of say, you know what, I'm fried today. I don't know what I'm doing with beets, but you turn it to somebody else and they may have an idea. And so it really creates that collaborative process.
You've worked hard to really you train your chefs. You have a kind of a unique your process for that, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we really like to encourage growth with specifically with the entire staff, but specifically with our team of chefs for our kitchen. I think that can be said that there are a lot of people that work in the front of the house where it might be a step in their progression until they're because they're pursuing another degree or they're pursuing another profession of some sort. But we'll find that typically the chefs that work with us, this is their life focus. This is what they've committed themselves to for the rest of their life. And so we try and create an environment that helps with that. So we ask for a rough timeline of like a 2-year commitment, and they make their entire way around the kitchen, everything from protein fabrication to working a vegetable station where they're taking care of vegetables, starches, purees, to working garde manger, which is like the cold keeper of the kitchen, doing everything from salads to helping plate desserts and things. They'll finish on what we call the pass, which is in most kitchens like the expo line, where they're calling orders, calling tickets, helping plate food, kind of the final eyes on everything before it leaves the kitchen. And then they finish in the office with some of the administrative duties. So, and the idea behind that is so that when they leave us, they're not sidestepping. They're moving up and running a kitchen somewhere else, whether it be in Omaha or somewhere else in the country.
Wow, so that's really kind of nurturing a human resource, even right on beyond you then.
Absolutely. We teach the adage of, run it like you own it.
That's great. So it sounds like you have I'm kind of sensing an overall philosophy of, in a sense, listening to yourself and what brings you alive, but also then that motivates you to listen to other people, what brings them alive, listen to your ingredients, what brings out the life from those ingredients as well, so that each place around you is essentially doing its highest good, that's distinctive to it. Have you ever had any times where you've been challenged by that? To have a restaurant that is that is so distinctive, you've got to have people who say, well, you ought to be doing this, this, or this. There's a million ways to run a restaurant, and you've got one that is unique here. Is that ever a temptation to, I don't know, either dumb things down or make things into more one-size-fits-all, or?
That's a good question. I don't think so. No, I think that, we feel very fortunate to do what we do every day. That, we love what we do. And I think that, I don't think we could change what we do to create a restaurant that is one size fits all. Because I think that's what makes it special or makes it different. Yeah, I don't know if that exactly answers your question, but
I think what you just said is for us it would be a sin. It would be a separation. Yeah.
There you go. Absolutely.
Absolutely.